My name is Harpreet. I'm a registered nurse here and operations manager at Port Credit Therapy Center. I support our psychotherapy services as well as ketamine and psychedelic assisted therapy services, and I'm really happy to be here hosting tonight's conversation. Before we begin, there's a little bit of housekeeping that will be taking place, so I'll just make a few quick points here. So this session is being recorded, and we'll be sending out the recording to everyone who registered so you can revisit anything that resonates with you this evening. We'll also be hosting a Q&A at the end of our session. You can use the Q&A function in Teams to submit anything that comes up for you along the way. And if it feels comfortable, you are very welcome to keep your camera on. We always appreciate being able to connect a bit more as humans. And of course, there's no pressure at all. So tonight's webinar is called Understanding Couples Therapy, a Beginner's Guide. So we'll be exploring what couples therapy actually looks like, how it can support stronger communication and connection, and what to expect if you're considering this kind of work. Whether you're navigating challenges in your relationships or simply focusing on how couples therapy works, this is a space to unpack common patterns and begin to understand how change and growth can happen together. So I'm really happy to be joined by three wonderful members of our clinical team tonight. We have Dawn Benkowski, who is a registered psychotherapist and clinic director here at Port Credit Therapy Center. Dawn brings a deeply trauma-informed and relational approach to her work, and her extensive experience supporting individuals and couples in navigating complex emotional landscapes with care, attunement, and clarity. We also are joined by Ilandri Govender, who is a therapist at Port Credit Therapy Center and works from a compassionate, client-centered lens, supporting individuals and couples in exploring patterns, emotional needs, and relational dynamics. Her work focuses on creating a safe and supportive space where vulnerability and honest communication can emerge. And we also have Richard Utama, who is a registered social worker and clinical supervisor, who brings a thoughtful and grounded approach to couples work. He integrates modalities like the Gottman method and supports couples in building practical tools around communication, conflict, and reconnection. And I'll transition it over to the speakers.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Why couples therapy? Couples rarely seek therapy because love is gone. More often, they feel stuck in patterns they don't understand. Communication may feel strained, repetitive, or emotionally charged without any resolution. Partners can feel unseen, unheard, or misunderstood over time. Couples therapy offers a structured space to slow down and examine what's happening beneath the surface. The focus shifts from who is the problem to understanding the relationship as a dynamic system. Next slide, please.
Hey, Hi everyone. So we're gonna jump into a common starting point. And so many couples really enter therapy hoping for clarity on who is right or wrong. There's often a desire there for validation from a neutral third party, enter said therapist. And this can reflect deeper needs to feel seen, heard, or justified. And so in therapy, it really just gently redirects this towards curiosity rather than judgment. So we're not looking at kind of who's right or wrong, we're just looking to understand. And then we begin to explore patterns instead of assigning blame. So a little bit about my approach in couples therapy. I tend to use an EFTC-based model and a Gottman model. And so EFTC, it basically stands for Emotionally Focused Therapy for Couples, and it really focuses on the emotional bond and attachment patterns between partners. And so it helps identify unmet needs and the ways partners reach or struggle to reach for each other. And so we'll hear a little bit more about this approach as we move along in the slides. But EFTC, very similar to EFT if you're using that in your individual sessions, where we're really wanting to focus on the emotions that are driving some of these deeper things that are coming up in the relationship. And so through EFTC, we teach a model of communication, which again we'll jump into a little bit later, but just to give you an idea there, with Gottman method, with Gottman, he really gives us the language that stems from research to help us communicate different patterns, especially when it comes to conflict that might show up in the relationship. And so together, these two approaches, they balance that emotional depth that we get from the EFTC model with practical tools that Gottman gives us in terms of the languages and the tools that we use to help couples move more towards their goals. And so the goal is to strengthen connection while increasing awareness. Next slide, please. Okay. So building core relationship skills. When we're working with the EFTC model and using the Gottman method, which basically with the Gottman method, we're using a checklist of 19 different areas in the relationship that are impacting your ability to connect with each other in different ways. And so on the slide here, we're looking at the different skills that the Gottman method helps us build language around, and the FTC model helps us build skills around in connecting to each other. And so part of the skills that these two models bring into our sessions together is active listening. So we're hearing to understand, not to respond. So we're there to take up space in ways that we feel comfortable, and we're opening up conversations using language that makes sense to us. And our partners are there to meet us where we're at, and then we build on that together as we increase that active listening. Next, we have emotional attunement. So emotional attunement is recognizing and responding to a partner's emotional state. And so that's basically being able to level with your partner in a way where you're connecting with them in that moment while we're in session together. So we're listening, we're connecting, and now we're building that empathy. Now we're starting to validate each other's internal experience without needing agreement. We're really letting this person be able to open up in, again, ways that make sense to them so that we can hear them out and really validate that what they're going through is real and that we see that and that we understand that. And how we externalize that is through clear communication. And so now that we've listened, we're connected to each other, the empathy is there. Now we want to start expressing our needs and boundaries with intention. And so, altogether, these skills support connection, especially during moments of tension or conflict when we're needing a way to move forward in a healthy way. Next slide, please. Alrighty. So couples therapy often services personal triggers, wounds, and patterns. And that can really lead to the individual in the relationship seeing themselves struggle internally in different ways. And so when that individual work starts to really overtake our couples therapy sessions together, we want to be able to redirect them to individual work in the relationship so that that can really help them understand attachment styles and past relational experiences and how that's shaping their present dynamics. And so partners can benefit from individual therapy alongside couples work. So if ever I get to a place with a couple where I'm noticing that one partner is really taking up a lot of our time together to focus on something individual, I'll encourage them to seek individual therapy so that our couples work can be on track in a way that feels good for both partners. So really about sharing the space in a way that feels good for everyone while not neglecting very personal needs that are coming up as well. And so while a partner branches out into individual therapy, they're often building their self-awareness. And so that starts to deepen the capacity to show up differently in the relationship. So doing that individual work alongside the couple's work can add a lot more depth and meaning to the couple's work as a whole. And so that's where growth happens, both individually and relationally, which together can be a really cool thing. Alrighty, so now we've got the emotions going, we've got the communication flowing, we're understanding patterns and things like that. All of this information really helps us shift the dynamic. So therapy encourages a shift from me versus you to a shared we perspective. And so now the language plays a powerful role in how conflict unfolds. And so questions like what's happening for us right now create space for collaboration. So we're transitioning from that, you're right, I'm wrong, you're the bad one, I'm the good one, to now, what are we noticing? What are we understanding? How is this translating into the relationship we're wanting to cultivate for ourselves? And so it now becomes the relationship becomes something we're working on together versus something that we are competing against each other for. And so, what are we fighting for starts to come up, and that helps reconnect to shared values and goals. So, we're not pitting anyone against each other, we're all working together, and now we have the insight and we're building the skills together to be able to translate that outside of session. And so, this shift supports connection over competition. So a big part of couples therapy, especially within the EFTC model and Gottman, at the core of it is that element of safety and vulnerability. So core goal of therapy is to create emotional safety between partners. And so that safety allows for vulnerability, honesty, and deeper connection. And so common dynamics that can pop up that often work against the safety and vulnerability pieces is when someone is the pursuer and they're seeking more closeness, often shows up as anxiety or fear-based responses in the relationship. They are then pursuing the distancer who is seeking space in the relationship. And so those two ways of showing up in the relationship, they conflict with each other by not really meeting each other, but more so kind of pushing each other away and further along a route that doesn't feel good for either of them. And so that's something that often shows up in therapy in terms of a common pattern. And so what we know about that common pattern is that both roles are rooted in attempts to feel safe, though they may appear opposing in the beginning. But once we start understanding these patterns, it helps reduce blame and increases compassion, which is what we're looking for, right? That what are we fighting for here? What's coming up here? How can we work together here? Um, and so understanding these patterns reduces the blame and it increases the compassion, which is really helpful. Now, outside of session, during our sessions together, we definitely build on these various skills and we root it in research, which we hope drives real change outside of session. And so to keep that going, I often like to recommend clients an activity, which is called the Healing Couples Cards. Basically, if y'all are looking to purchase it or look into it a little bit, it's called the Space and Conversation card game, and it's the Healing Couples card edition. It's produced by the Skin Deep, and basically there are instructions on the back here, but very straightforwardly, it's a way for you to connect with your partner outside of session to be able to practice these skills and build a deeper connection. And so first we're going to sit facing one another with a foot of distance between you. Really, how close can we get? Because that space matters. Select a question randomly from the deck and ask the other person. So it's a random question. We don't know what's coming our way. It's fun in that kind of way. And then alternate asking and answering questions. That way, everyone's getting a fair chance. And you are allowed to pass, but if you pass, it's important to look your partner in the eye, hold that eye contact for 10 seconds before y'all move on. And that really helps put into practice the skills, build language, create space for couples to be safe and vulnerable with each other outside a session together. So this can be a really helpful resource or tool.
Thank you, Alandri. That's very formative. So I'd like to continue with a Gottman approach. One aspect of Gottman method that really is really useful in my couples therapy is called the Four Horsemen. So, as most of us know, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse is a metaphor depicting the end of times in the New Testament. They describe conquest, war, hunger, and death. We use this metaphor to describe communication styles that, according to their research, can predict the end of a relationship. The first four horsemen is criticism, second, contempt, third is defensiveness, and the last one is stonewalling. So once you are able to identify the four horsemen in your conflict discussions, that is a necessary first step to eliminating them and replacing them with healthy, productive communication patterns. Now, I also apply this method called discernment therapy. Not all couples going into therapy looking to continue their relationships. Some of them is looking to separate or taking space, taking time to be apart from each other. So this process prioritizes clarity, honesty, and intentional decision making. Therapy becomes a space for their own reflection rather than reaction. Okay, next slide, please. So when couples come into therapy, typically what happens, one of them has already decided that they want to split up, separate. The other one could be hanging on to that relationship, could still worth trying the relationship. So they may explore whether to repair, separate, or pause and reflect. This focus is making grounded, informed choices rather than reactive ones. They also support in understanding their roles within the relationship, the dynamics, the patterns that have existed in their relationship. This reduces impulsivity and increases accountability. The clarity that they gain often brings relief, even when decisions are difficult. Next slide, please. Now, we talk about separation with care. When they choose to separate, therapy supports a respectful and intentional process. The goal is to reduce harm and avoid unnecessary conflict or blame, which I often coin as blame storming. This is your fault. This is this is your doing to break us up. Okay? So again, the blame storming happens between partners. Partners can then move toward closure with greater understanding and also empathy. This is especially important when shared responsibilities or families, children are involved. Ending a relationship can definitely still honor the connection that existed. So, in summary, it's separation with amicability rather than animosity. Yep. Now, understanding the relationship system. Any relationship can be understood like a living ecosystem that requires ongoing care. The way I often approach relationship is like a plant. It needs attention, it needs care, it needs water, it needs fertilizer, it needs consistency to thrive and grow. Also, I often approach couplehood like a corporation. A business-like agreement requires shared responsibility and structure, compromises, negotiations. Both partners influence the health and the direction of their relationship. I often see couples go together in the same direction. However, one can go faster than the other, and one is just following behind. Then one partner needs to slow down and wait for the other to catch up to go in the same direction. However, I also notice some couples going the other direction and switch lanes. So the one partner takes on the other partner's role, vice versa. So awareness of the system supports more intentional engagement. Okay, next slide, please. Conflicts. Conflicts is inevitable. Conflicts is part of life. It's not inherently harmful. It is how couples engage with it that matters. Some patterns include fixing, withdrawing, escalating, or shutting down, which back to the four horsemen is stonewalling. Right? Typically, one partner is the fixer, hoping to fix the problem of the other partner has. However, the other partner just needs the other partner just needs he's their partner to stay present rather than going into the fixing mode. Couples often shift into fighting each other rather than fighting for the relationship. Couples therapy supports staying present rather than rushing to resolve or avoid. Not everything has to be resolved immediately or fixed right away. The most important thing is connection, which is the priority over who is being right or who is being wrong. Okay. Now, my work with couples also include a wide range of relationship structures, identities, and agreements. This include queer couples, LGBTQ plus couples, and diverse relational experiences. Also include non-monogamous and polyamorous relationships. Focus remains on consent, communication, alignment of values. Therapy adapts to the relationship, not the other way around. Right? Thank you. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'll be running a webinar on LGBTQ Wednesday, June 24th. The title is Queerness Through a Racialized Lens. I'm going to share some helpful exercises for couples. So experiential work helps couples understand patterns through direct experience. Exercises like leaning in or back to back. So you have each other's supports and you can feel their motion as well when you're leaning in with your partners. Partners become aware of physical and emotional responses in real time. This creates insight beyond intellectual understanding. Our bodies often reveal what words cannot say. Yep.
Okay, I guess I'm up. Thank you, Richard and Elandri. That's really interesting, helpful information. Nodding my head to many of the things that you both said. I'm going to talk a little more about how trauma comes into play in relationships, and having a trauma-informed lens when we're engaging with clients in couples therapy helps to understand how some of their, what I might call developmental trauma, might impact how they're interacting with each other in a relationship. I work from a perspective that we all have some core wounds. We all have developmental trauma where we adapted to our family of origin and the dynamic that we were born into, which tends to move us away from our most authentic selves inside. But we learn it's very important from the moment that we're born to feel as securely attached as possible to our caregivers. And that is what accounts for this adaptation that we all do. I'll use myself as an example that my adaptation in my family of origin was I became the emotional caretaker and the people pleaser in my family and prioritized my parents' feelings because if they were calm and happy, then that made it easier for me to feel securely attached to them. And what happens with these adaptations in our first relationships, our first relationship is with our caregivers, that then leads us to develop beliefs about how we need to be in a relationship in order to be loved and accepted. Also, it will imprints on us. The developmental trauma or the core wounds that we have has imprinted into our survival mechanism. And the amygdala part of our brain that is constantly scanning for danger then starts looking for how we might be hurt in a relationship. And so we fast forward a little until we are, an adult and we're starting to explore our own romantic relationships. And what can happen is it's now imprinted that we can be hurt deeply from the people that we are closest to, the ones we have committed to. And so that's what tends to emerge in the couple's relationship when there's conflict. There also can be, I don't need the slide yet because I'm all over the place, but that's okay. That's fine. No need to go back. So trauma is a way that it becomes part of our defense mechanism, our protection mechanism happens. And what happens with this is we have a tendency to, when we get reactive, these core wounds get activated, we then start to make up a story about the other person and our partner. And that's why it is so important to do this work of couples therapy in increasing our ability to listen to each other from an active listening place, to recognize the stories that we're making up in our head that rarely have anything to do actually with what's happening in the relationship. It's our fear that is filling the space. And filling in the gaps of what we don't know or what is ambiguous in our relationship. So this absolutely can cause a heightened reactivity, emotional shutdown, or the fear-based responses, the four horsemen that Richard talked about, the pursuer-distancer dynamic that Elandri talked about. And then what happens, of course, is when our partner is in a reactive mindset, then we are interpreting their mindset a certain way that typically feeds the insecure narrative that we have. And so if there isn't communication that's happening, ruptures start, and then they get wider and wider because we're just adding to the layers of misunderstanding and projection that we are doing to each other in relationship. And one thing I want to mention that almost all of us are bringing our parents or our important caretakers into the relationship with us. And Esther Perel is she's a famous couples therapist, and I quite like part of what she has to say about this and how we can bring these things into our romantic relationships. In her book, Mating in Captivity, she talks about that it's important to reflect back to our own childhood. Did we learn to experience pleasure or not? Did we learn to trust others or not? Did we learn to receive or be denied? Were our parents monitoring our needs, or were we expected to monitor theirs? Did we turn to our caregivers for protection, or did we flee from them to protect ourselves? Were we rejected, humiliated, or abandoned by our caregivers? Were we held? Were we rocked? Were we soothed? Were our caregivers there to help us find emotional regulation and emotional attunement? Or were we left having to figure all of that out on our own? And lastly, did we learn not to expect too much, to hide when we are upset, to not make eye contact, to not reach out for support? And these are very important questions to look at when we look at how we are behaving and what we are projecting into our relationships with our significant other or others. She also, Esther Perel also talks about, and Elandri mentioned, tapped into this as well, that instead of what are couples fighting about, it's what are they fighting for? And typically couples are fighting for, care and closeness. Do you have my back? Can I trust you? Or respect and recognition. Can you value me, or are you taking me for granted? And lastly, power and control. Whose priorities and needs matter more? And what can happen is, someone who is used to being the emotional caretaker for others, maybe more of the pursuer, tends to pair up with somebody that is more of a distancer and someone who is wanting somebody else to meet their needs as opposed to them reaching out and prioritizing the other. And so these people get into a relationship together, and in a way they are reenacting the familiar dynamics that they experienced or witnessed in their family of origin growing up. And in a way, this inner child part of us is often responsible for choosing our partner. It's not conscious, but there'll be something similar that we are reacting to or responding to that reminds us of a previous dynamic. Again, it's unconscious, but the previous dynamic that we experienced, typically with one of our caregivers. And it's as though that inner child in us is going, oh my gosh, I've got a chance for a do-over right now. But I have a chance for a do-over with a different result. If I can make this person see me or hear me, this person can prioritize my wants and needs, then in a way I'll be able to complete the cycle of what I was trying to get my caregivers to do, but wasn't able to do because I was just a child. And then that will make me recognize that it wasn't my fault in the disconnect or the core wounds that I came out of childhood with. Sometimes what can happen is this leads to what's called a trauma bond, where the wounded part of two people go, oh my gosh, wow, I recognize something familiar and similar in you. And this is happening vice versa. And typically these relationships are very quick to get intense and get serious. And it's just this, oh my God, I feel healed by you. I've never felt so understood and heard. And the two people are really just feeding this dynamic with intensity of, finally, I found my person who can see me and help me feel safe. And there's a lot of projection that's going on right then. One way to identify whether there's a trauma bond or even the health of a relationship is when there is a rupture and when there's conflict. Anybody can have a good relationship when my need or want is the same as my partner's need or want. It's easy to have a good relationship. The difficulties arises when my need or want is different than your need or want. And how do we navigate this, and what story do we attach to it? So in a trauma bond relationship, if that is at its core, things devolve very, very quickly when your need or want is different from mine. And there typically is a lot of reactivity, whether that is escalating reactivity or shutting down reactivity. And it's very hard for the couple to be able to work through that. If they are going to continue, there's more of a presentation of, let's just sweep it under the rug. We're going to anything to get rid of this horrible feeling of the disconnect. I just want to feel reconnected to you. And we aren't going to go through and deal with what the actual problem was. So which leads to there being repetition in the conflict. The content might be a little different, whether you left the pair of socks on the floor or you're leaving the cabinet door open, or you're doing the thing that I've told you that really, really hurts me. But rarely is it about the content. It's about what the content is representing back to those pieces. So this is we're quite complex and fascinating in our humanness. And by increasing our awareness in couples therapy and as well in our own therapy, we're better able to recognize what we are bringing into the relationship dynamic, and then being able to actually take action if needed to do something different. If we find out that one of the ways that we are interacting with our partner is leading to a bigger rupture, or it's wounding or hurting our partner, or it's maladaptive because we're not getting anywhere. We're just saying the same thing over and over again without anything that we can both work on together that will lead to sustainable change. So let's see what the next slide is. I have no idea if I've already covered that or whether there's something else there. So yes, there are some very important pieces of a healthy relationship, but I just want to go back to one more thing that I forgot. If you identify, or it's identified that there's a trauma bond in a relationship, it does not mean that the relationship can't work towards co-creating a healthier foundation. It's just we have to have that awareness about what's getting activated in us, attach it back to what the root of it was. Oh my gosh, I never felt heard as a child in my family of origin. So when you interrupt me and cut me off, that core wound is getting activated, and I'm projecting all of that wounding that I've been holding on to for a lifetime onto my partner, but they didn't cause the wound. And we also have a lot more resources and remedies at our disposal as an adult than what we did typically when the wound was created, when we were a child and powerless to actually protect ourselves or effect any change. But as an adult, we have many supports available to us, including ending the relationship if we determine that it is not healthy for us and we aren't a good fit for each other. So it is possible to work through a trauma bond. I highly recommend doing it with the support of a couples therapist. There's one way of looking at trauma, that our trauma was created in relationship. And so it helps for it to be healed in relationship. And the couples therapist provides that support for two people that are getting activated, their wounds are getting brought to the surface. for the couples therapist to be there as the support to help each of these people recognize their own wounds and be able to support each other better to help heal those wounds in relationship. So yes, foundations of a healthy relationship. Care, like Richard's models of the plant or the corporation, absolutely. We have to tend to our relationships. We have to make sure that we aren't taking our partners for granted, that we are giving ourselves permission to say, that thing that you did, I need to talk to you about it because of the way that it impacted me, rather than stuffing it down and stuffing it down and stuffing it down till all of a sudden it becomes something that we can't contain anymore. And then there's an explosion. And then we're talking or kitchen sinking about all these little wounds that we have experienced over the past 6 months. It's not fair to dump on somebody like that. So we want to increase our ability to address the issues as they're coming up before they become big issues. So consistently showing up, intention and support, closeness, maintaining emotional connection and accessibility. Absolutely. Very few of us grew up in an environment where there was as much support as we needed in processing our feelings as children. And it's not because our caregivers were bad people, it's just they didn't get that support themselves. Many of our caregivers grew up within an environment, children are to be seen and not heard, and they're supposed to internalize their feelings and just be good. And not cause any waves. And so it's really hard for our caregivers to give to us what they didn't get themselves. So this is often what is at the core of our difficulties in some of our closest relationships is how do we support ourselves? How do we turn to the other and support our partners in maintaining emotional connection when they're activated? And it is a big skill to learn. And a very important skill. And part of the maintaining emotional connection and emotional attunement isn't about, when the active listening, it isn't about agreeing that the way that our partner has portrayed things is accurate. We're not saying, yeah, I did that thing and I'm bad. It is more about saying, I can hear how upset you got when I forgot, when I didn't call you, when I told you I was going to call you. And given what I know about your history growing up and feeling dropped and abandoned, of course you would have been filled with fear and anxiety. Thank you so much for telling me this. Is there anything more you want to share? So we're holding space for our partner without saying, yep, I did the thing and I'm bad. It's saying, given how you interpreted what happened, of course, I am here to offer support. Let me know what you need. And again, thank you for telling me. That's okay. Going into the next thing, respect and recognition, seeing the value of each other's experience. Just talked about that. Awareness of power and control, understanding dynamics that impact safety. And this, that often helps in couples therapy. When we learn a little bit about what our partner's experience was, what's getting activated in them and what the core wound might be, then it can help us to recognize that something's getting activated in them in a very vulnerable way, and that we're just kind of tapping into that, not causing it. And that can, again, help us manage the defensiveness that can come up and be able to be there to deeply listen to what our partner is saying and offer support and put our own reactivity on a side shelf, because that's also about us and our own previous experience. To the point, yes, healthy relationships are not conflict-free. When you look at it, that conflict is a normal part of a relationship. It's unrealistic to think that the other person's needs or wants and feelings are going to be exactly the same as yours all the time. No. So there's times when when my wants or needs are going to be different than my partner's, and then it's how do we navigate that? There are times when my partner's need is more present and important than my need, and so I learn to put mine on the shelf and to address what's coming up for my partner with the understanding that we're building reciprocity. So there'll be times when my need is more important and my partner will be able to do the same thing or be able to hold on. I'm going to talk about my feelings later. Right now, this is really important and I'm going to hold space for you. So the model is ruptures and repairs, with the intent being that we're able to get to the repair quicker than as we build these skills. And, you know, to Ilandri's point, that instead of the me versus you, we are building our ability to look at the we. We have a conflict in our relationship. We have an issue. How are we going to navigate this with mutual respect, monitoring our own reactivity and being able to deal with that and put that to the side so that we can be grounded when engaging with each other and engaging in deep listening so that we can look, here's the issue, we're going to draw on all of our skills so that we can come out the other side with a solution or resolution. And sometimes the thing that was the big thing that we needed to have addressed loses importance if we're feeling heard and supported in our feelings. And it isn't so much about the fact that you didn't pick your coffee cup up. It's, I realize that you feel that I haven't been, or that I got a little confused in where I was going there. It's not, it's that I feel, I can hear that you understand that I'm feeling that sometimes you aren't recognizing your impact. And that it isn't that you're taking me for granted. It's just that you forgot that the coffee cup was there. So you're going to be mindful to know how I interpret that, to be more careful about what you do with your coffee cup. But that's about feeling appreciated and acknowledged as opposed to being anything about the coffee cup. Okay, is there another slide? I have no idea. Right. So couples therapy offers a space to slow down and understand patterns. That is really important. I think Ilandri had also mentioned it's also quite helpful to have some understanding about what our own attachment patterns are. Attachment theory can help us understand, are we avoidantly attached, anxiously attached, disorganized attached, or securely attached, with the understanding that there's variation in that. It's not like we're one way and only one way. It's just recognizing that in a certain relationship dynamic, we may have a tendency to adopt one of those attachment styles, which does have its roots back in how we were supported by our caregivers and our attachment, how we felt attached to them. The couples therapy supports deeper awareness of self and the partner, because as you both kind of mentioned, you know, people come into couples therapy and it's this you, and they are expecting the couples therapist to sit there and take their side and say, yes, your partner is wrong, you are right. And that is not our role as the couples therapist. Our role, the relationship is the client, and our role is to help them understand what they are bringing into the relationship and how they might co-create a healthier foundation, and being mindful and taking accountability and recognizing how they're feeding the unhealthy dynamic. Whether the goal is reconnection or separation, the process is meaningful. And, you know, Richard spoke to that. It is so important to recognize that couples therapy is sometimes about figuring out, can we stay together or not? And if it's a no, we can't stay together, how to do this in as healthy a way as possible, especially if there's children. But even if there isn't children, I have worked with people that are still locked in a negative relationship with the person they divorced 15 years ago. They no longer have any contact with them, but they haven't been able to process and work through this negative relationship that's been reinforced over and over again. So it is a real gift to ourselves if we recognize that we are in a relationship that isn't healthy for us, and we can't co-create the healthy relationship we have wanted to do it with kindness and compassion and understanding to both ourselves and the other and the relationship for what, because we learned and grew in that relationship. And it may very well have given us the awareness to be able to then seek out the healthiest relationship we've ever had in our next relationship. Change happens through awareness, intention, and practice, absolutely. And yeah, there is no such thing as perfection. Perfectly imperfect. And it is recognizing and supporting our humanness. The other thing I think is a very important part of a healthy relationship is learning to respect and hold space for the differentness of our partner. Sometimes that can be an activating thing. They don't think the same way, they're not doing the same thing, then that flags potential danger. When we're all different, and we typically are attracted to somebody that's a little different. And often what's at the root of that is we each need a little of what the other is bringing. But that then can become the rupture because they aren't the same as us and engaging the same way. But if you know we're the fixer and we are drawn to somebody that leaves a lot of space and doesn't feel the need to fix anybody else, we probably need to learn to leave a little more space, and the other might need to learn to be a little more involved in what's going on in the relationship. So I think that's it for my portion.
Okay, so thank you, Dawn, Elendry, and Richard. Before we do jump into our Q&A, thank you again so much for this rich and informative webinar. We have had some great questions come in, so I'll just get right into it. So our very first question is, for the experiential exercise you mentioned, I believe that was Elendry, what if one partner is more emotionally open than the other? How do you adapt in the moment? That's a great question. Thank you for that.
Oh, and the experiential, I'm guessing they're referring to the cards here.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, being able to notice that in and of itself is a helpful reflection that we can be able to communicate to our partner about what we're noticing. So from there, we're not making assumptions, or we're not kind of leading down paths that might be a little bit inaccurate, but we're essentially allowing our partner to hear where we're coming from, what we're noticing, and then you all get to decide together what that collaboration looks like in terms of how do we move forward with this activity based on kind of where we're at right now and what's coming up there. But like Dawn was saying, it's very common for people not to meet each other exactly where they're at any given moment. There are other factors we need to consider there. So I like the insight where we're asking questions around problem solving. And sometimes part of that is that communication with partners so that we can collaborate on how to do that.
Great, thank you for that. We have one more question about the the exercises. Are there grounding strategies you use if a partner becomes overwhelmed during the exercise?
I'll jump in here as well. So grounding exercises is going to look different for everyone. Part of building our toolkit and individual toolkit is knowing what we need in these different moments to be able to take care of our feelings. And so if we're noticing again that one partner is feeling a little bit more dysregulated than another, how can we work together to build a safer space for the both of them? How can we then look more into individual toolkits for the specific person that's kind of navigating that. And everyone's different in that aspect of things. It's a very general question in terms of kind of what helps people relax more or manage their emotions more. That's definitely a bigger question around, what that toolkit looks like for them and how we can kind of build on it from there. But a framework I really like to use, especially when it comes to self-care, regulating our emotions, that kind of thing. I like to recommend to clients the DOSE chart. So DOSE stands for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And it basically, again, it helps clients with building language around what kind of needs are coming up right now and how they can go to specific people, places, or things to help them regulate those things that are coming up for them in very specific ways. And so that chart can be very helpful for exploring individual needs and how to go about taking care of those needs. And there are various things on the chart there, from like journaling to mindfulness to guided meditations to feel it, to name it, to tame it, talking to a person you feel comfortable with. But yeah, lots of kind of tools on the dose chart for you to be able to build the individual toolkit.
I'll jump in a little here too, that I will work experientially with clients sometimes if they feel, if I assess that they are open to that. But what is really important if I'm going to do something like that is we've already built a relationship, so it isn't something that I'm going to do right in the very beginning, but it is going over in great detail, explaining exactly what I'm going to ask them to do and get consent the whole way along. Are you comfortable with this? Is this too much? Do we need to pull it back a little bit? And then I'm watching how they are engaging. And if in the experiential piece, someone is starting to get dysregulated, then I'll say we need to pause and I'll inquire what's going on, what just happened, and we'll find out what just got activated right there. And if needed, we can do a little breath work right there. I think that's very helpful if I'm working with couples that tend to join each other in emotional escalation, then early on, I will start to introduce that when this starts to happen, I'm going to invite us all to stop and do some breathing. We're just going to do some deep breathing for a little bit, because you're wasting your money if the two of you, and paying me, if the two of you are arguing up here and neither one of you are listening to each other. So this is something you're putting an investment in here. So let's come down, let's ground ourselves, and then we'll continue again. One of the experiential pieces I find quite interesting and fascinating in people's difficulty in doing this is I will ask a couple, one would be the giver, one's going to be receiver. They'll decide who's going to go first, and then they're going to switch. And it is very, very simple. The receiver is going to place their hand out like this, and the giver is going to, solely by instruction, touch their partner's, the receiver's hand, solely with how the receiver is instructing them to do it. So I would like you to stroke my palm with your index finger. I would like you to do it harder. I would like you to do it softer. I'd like you to touch the other part of your hand. And just this very simple exercise of asking for exactly what you want, and the other person doing solely what is being asked of them and nothing more, reveals a tremendous amount about how the two of them interact regarding their needs and their wants. And so this, there's different ways other than just talk therapy that we can help people get awareness about the difficulties that they're having in a relationship. So there's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. I'm going to transition forward into our announcements that we are at the end of our session. So again, I want to thank everyone for their presence and participation in today's webinar. We will be sending out a recording of today's session about tomorrow or the day after. There is a chance to revisit things if anything did resonate, that recording. And of course, if any question does come up later, as they usually do, feel free to reach out to us. You'll see your email on the next slide. You can also stay connected with us on our Instagram page, Port Credit Therapy, and our website, portcredittherapy.com. We do have a webinar coming up next month in May on personality disorders, so do keep an eye out for that. And until then, take good care, and we hope to see you again.